Sarah Mitchell had always been drawn to water. As a child growing up near Lake Tahoe, she spent countless hours swimming in its crystal-clear depths, diving for smooth stones that caught her eye. Her parents often joked that she was more fish than human, the way she moved through water with such natural grace and confidence. By age 25, Sarah had built a successful career as a marine biologist, specializing in underwater ecosystems. Her work took her to some of the most remote and beautiful lakes across the country, studying aquatic life patterns and environmental changes. She was known among her colleagues for her fearless approach to deep water research and her ability to hold her breath longer than most professional divers. Sarah lived alone in a small cabin overlooking Mirror Lake, a pristine body of water nestled in the mountains of Colorado. The lake was her sanctuary, her office, and her playground all rolled into one. Every morning she would wake before dawn, sip her coffee on the wooden deck, and watch the mist rise from the water's surface as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The local community knew Sarah well. She was the friendly scientist who helped the fishing guides understand seasonal patterns, who volunteered to test water quality for the county, and who never hesitated to help when someone's boat broke down on the lake. Children from the nearby summer camp adored her because she would show them interesting specimens she collected during her research dives. But Sarah harbored a secret that even her closest friends didn't know. 3 years earlier, while conducting research in the Pacific Northwest, she had witnessed something that changed her life forever. During a routine dive in a supposedly abandoned quarry, she had discovered evidence of illegal dumping by a major corporation. Barrels of toxic chemicals lay scattered across the quarry floor, slowly leaking their contents into the groundwater that supplied drinking water to thousands of people in the surrounding communities. When Sarah tried to report her findings to the Environmental Protection Agency, she quickly learned that the corporation had powerful connections. Her initial reports were buried in bureaucratic red tape, and she began receiving threatening phone calls warning her to stop her investigation. The company, Meridian Industries, was a major defense contractor with ties to military projects and government officials who seemed determined to protect them from any environmental scandal. Undeterred, Sarah had quietly begun collecting more evidence. She photographed the barrels, took water samples, and documented the extent of the contamination. She stored all of this evidence in a waterproof case that she kept hidden in her cabin, planning to eventually expose the truth through environmental advocacy groups and investigative journalists who couldn't be bought or intimidated. As months passed, Sarah noticed strange vehicles parked near her property. Sometimes she would spot the same unfamiliar faces in town, people who didn't look like tourists or locals. Her phone calls seemed to echo strangely, and she suspected her communications were being monitored. Despite the growing pressure, she continued her work, both her legitimate research and her secret investigation into Meridian Industries. The people of the small mountain community saw none of this tension in Sarah's daily life. To them, she remained the cheerful scientist who waved from her kayak each morning and who always had time to answer questions about the lake's ecosystem. Local shop owners saved interesting stones and shells for her, knowing her passion for geological specimens. The elderly couple who ran the bait shop often invited her for dinner, treating her like the daughter they never had. Sarah's routine was as predictable as the sunrise. Every Tuesday and Friday, she would conduct deep-water research dives, sometimes staying underwater for over an hour with her specialized equipment. She preferred to work alone, claiming that multiple divers disturbed the natural behavior of the aquatic life she was studying. Her diving gear was state-of-the-art, including a custom wetsuit designed for the cold mountain water and a breathing apparatus that allowed for extended underwater sessions. On weekends, Sarah would often host small gatherings at her cabin for fellow researchers, local environmental enthusiasts, and anyone interested in learning about lake conservation. These informal meetings had become popular in the community, with people bringing potluck dishes and staying late into the evening discussing everything from fish migration patterns to water, temperature changes caused by climate change. But beneath the surface of this idyllic life, Sarah was planning her next move against Meridian Industries. She had finally made contact with an investigative journalist from a major newspaper who specialized in corporate environmental crimes. They had arranged to meet the following month to review her evidence and plan how to safely expose the toxic waste dumping without putting Sarah in immediate danger. Sarah had also reached out to several environmental lawyers who handled whistleblower cases, hoping to find legal protection before going public with her discoveries. She knew that once her story broke, her quiet life by the lake would be over forever, but she believed the health of thousands of people was worth the sacrifice of her peaceful existence. As autumn approached, the trees around Mirror Lake began to turn brilliant shades of red and gold. Sarah spent more time than usual on her deck, watching the changing colors reflect in the still water. She seemed to sense that major changes were coming to her life, though she couldn't have imagined how dramatically and tragically those changes would unfold. The last person to see Sarah alive was Tom Bradley, the local postmaster, who waved to her as she loaded her diving equipment into her small boat on a crisp October morning. She had smiled and called out that she was planning to explore a section of the lake she had never studied before, an area where the water dropped to unusual depths near the center of the lake. That evening, when Sarah failed to return home, her absence went unnoticed at first. It wasn't unusual for her to stay out late when her research was going well, and her nearest neighbors were too far away to see whether lights were on in her cabin. It would be another full day before anyone realized that something was terribly wrong. Tom Bradley first noticed something was wrong when Sarah's mail began piling up in her box at the post office. For 3 days straight, newspapers, scientific journals, and personal letters went uncollected, which was completely unlike the methodical marine biologist who typically picked up her mail every morning on her way to the coffee shop. Concerned, Tom drove up the winding mountain road to Sarah's cabin on Thursday afternoon. Her small boat was missing from the dock, and there were no signs of life around the property. The coffee mug she had left on the deck railing was now filled with rainwater and fallen leaves. Tom peered through the windows and called out several times, but the cabin remained silent and empty. By Friday morning, Tom had contacted Sheriff Rebecca Martinez, a no-nonsense law enforcement officer who had served the mountain community for over 15 years. Sheriff Martinez knew Sarah well and immediately recognized that her disappearance was completely out of character. Sarah was responsible, predictable, and always informed someone if she planned to be away from home for more than a day. The initial search began that same afternoon. Sheriff Martinez organized a team of local volunteers, including experienced hikers, boat owners, and members of the Mountain Rescue Squad. They systematically searched the shoreline of Mirror Lake, looking for any signs of Sarah or her boat. The autumn air was crisp and clear, providing excellent visibility across the water's surface. By Saturday, the search had expanded to include professional divers from the county rescue team. Using sonar equipment borrowed from the state wildlife department, they began mapping the lake's bottom topology, looking for any unusual objects or formations that might indicate where Sarah's boat had gone down. The first significant discovery came on Sunday morning. Jake Morrison, a local fishing guide who knew every inch of Mirror Lake, spotted something glinting beneath the water near the lake's deepest point. When the divers investigated, they found Sarah's research boat resting on the lake bottom, nearly 60 feet below the surface. The condition of the boat immediately raised questions. While it appeared to have sunk straight down without drifting far from where it was found, there was no obvious damage to the hull that would explain why it went down. Sarah's diving equipment was still secured in its usual place, and her waterproof research containers remained intact and properly sealed. But Sarah herself was nowhere to be found. Sheriff Martinez called in Detective Ray Cooper from the state police, a specialist in suspicious disappearances and potential homicide cases. Detective Cooper had worked dozens of cases involving missing persons in remote areas, and his experience told him that something about this situation didn't add up. Cooper's investigation revealed several troubling details. Sarah's diving suit was missing from the boat, suggesting she had been wearing it when whatever happened occurred. However, her emergency breathing apparatus remained on board, which made no sense if she had been conducting a planned research dive. An experienced diver like Sarah would never enter the water without her backup oxygen supply. More disturbing was the discovery of Sarah's personal logbook, which she kept religiously to record her research activities and diving schedules. The final entry, dated the day she disappeared, contained only a partial sentence that ended abruptly mid-word, as if she had been interrupted while writing. The state crime lab analyzed water samples from inside the boat and found traces of Sarah's blood on the deck near the diving equipment storage area. The amount was small but sufficient to indicate that some kind of struggle or accident had occurred aboard the vessel before it sank. As news of Sarah's disappearance spread through the mountain community, people began coming forward with information that painted a more complex picture of her final weeks. Emma Rodriguez, who owned the local coffee shop, mentioned that Sarah had seemed increasingly nervous lately, often looking over her shoulder and jumping at unexpected sounds. Marcus Webb, a fellow researcher who had collaborated with Sarah on several projects, revealed that she had recently asked him unusual questions about anonymous communication methods and secure file storage. She had also inquired about environmental lawyers who specialized in protecting whistleblowers, though she wouldn't explain why she needed such information. The investigation took a darker turn when Detective Cooper discovered that Sarah's cabin had been searched. Though the intrusion was so carefully executed that it hadn't been noticed initially, whoever had gone through her belongings was clearly looking for something specific and had tried to leave. Everything exactly as they found it. Sarah's computer hard drive had been completely wiped clean using professional-grade software that left no recoverable data. Her filing cabinets, while appearing undisturbed, showed subtle signs that documents had been removed and reorganized. Most tellingly, the waterproof case where she kept her most sensitive research materials was missing entirely. Detective Cooper expanded his investigation to include Sarah's background and recent activities outside the immediate area. He discovered her connection to the Pacific Northwest Quarry research and her subsequent reports to the EPA about Meridian Industries. When he attempted to contact EPA officials about Sarah's complaints, he encountered an unusual level of bureaucratic stonewalling and was told that no records existed of her environmental reports. Phone records revealed that Sarah had received numerous calls from untraceable numbers in the weeks before her disappearance. The calls typically lasted only a few seconds, suggesting they might have been warning calls or attempts at intimidation. Her internet browsing history, recovered from her service provider, showed she had been researching personal security measures and had visited websites about witness protection programs. The mystery deepened when Detective Cooper learned that Sarah had withdrawn $5,000 in cash from her bank account 2 weeks before she vanished. Bank security footage showed her appearing nervous and repeatedly checking the parking lot while conducting the transaction. She had also purchased a new cell phone under a different name, using a fake identification that investigators later determined was quite sophisticated. Local business owners began reporting that they had noticed unfamiliar vehicles in the area around the time of Sarah's disappearance. A black SUV with tinted windows had been parked near the lake access road on several occasions, and its occupants seemed more interested in observing the area than in fishing or hiking like typical visitors. As the investigation entered its second week, Detective Cooper faced the grim reality that they were likely dealing with more than just a diving accident or simple disappearance. The evidence pointed toward a coordinated effort to silence Sarah and eliminate whatever information she had gathered about Meridian Industries' illegal activities, but the most puzzling aspect of the case remained the fact that Sarah's body had not been found despite extensive searches of the lake and surrounding wilderness areas. Experienced divers had explored every crevice and underwater cave system in Mirror Lake, and search teams had combed through miles of forest and mountainous terrain. The absence of her body, combined with the sophisticated nature of the apparent cover-up, suggested that whoever was responsible had both significant resources and experience in making problems disappear permanently. 3 weeks into the investigation, Detective Cooper received an unexpected visit from 2 federal agents who identified themselves as FBI Special Agents Patricia Wong and Michael Stevens. They arrived without warning and immediately requested all case files related to Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. Their sudden interest in what appeared to be a local missing person case raised immediate red flags for the experienced detective agent. Wong explained that Sarah's disappearance had potential national security implications but provided no additional details. When Detective Cooper pressed for more information, Agent Stevens simply stated that Meridian Industries held several classified government contracts, and any investigation touching on their operations required federal oversight. Cooper reluctantly handed over copies of his files, but retained his own investigative materials. His 30 years in law enforcement had taught him to be suspicious when federal agencies swooped in to take control of local cases, especially when they offered vague explanations about national security. The federal agents established their temporary headquarters in the local sheriff's office, much to Sheriff Martinez's displeasure. They began re-interviewing witnesses and examining evidence with a level of thoroughness that suggested they knew more about the case than they were revealing. Agent Wong spent considerable time reviewing Sarah's research background and her employment history, while Agent Stevens focused on the physical evidence from the lake and her cabin. Meanwhile, Cooper decided to conduct his own parallel investigation. He reached out to Dr. Amanda Foster, a former colleague of Sarah's who had worked with her on the Pacific Northwest Quarry project. Dr. Foster agreed to meet Cooper at a small cafe 3 hours away from Mirror Lake, insisting on the distance for privacy reasons. Dr. Foster revealed that Sarah had contacted her just days before her disappearance, asking for copies of research data they had collected together. Sarah had claimed that her original files had been compromised and that she needed backup documentation for an important meeting with federal environmental officials. More importantly, Dr. Foster disclosed that their quarry research had uncovered far more than illegal dumping. They had discovered evidence that Meridian Industries was using the remote location to test experimental materials for military applications. Some of the substances they had found were unlike anything in publicly available scientific literature, suggesting highly classified research and development projects. Dr. Foster also revealed that Sarah had been in contact with Commander James Harrison, a retired Navy SEAL who now worked as a private environmental consultant. Harrison had been investigating Meridian Industries from a different angle, focusing on their contracts with special operations units and their development of underwater equipment for military applications. This information prompted Cooper to seek out Commander Harrison, who was initially reluctant to discuss his involvement with Sarah or his knowledge of Meridian Industries. Harrison lived in a secluded mountain cabin 2 states away, and his background check revealed a distinguished military career including multiple classified missions and underwater operations. When Cooper finally convinced Harrison to meet, the retired SEAL painted a disturbing picture of corporate military cooperation gone wrong. Harrison explained that Meridian Industries had been developing advanced underwater breathing systems and submarine detection equipment for Navy SEAL operations. However, their research had apparently expanded into areas that violated environmental laws and potentially endangered civilian populations. Harrison revealed that he had been hired by a group of concerned military officers to investigate reports that Meridian's underwater testing facilities were contaminating water supplies near military bases. His investigation had led him to the same Pacific Northwest quarry where Sarah had made her discoveries, confirming her findings about illegal dumping. More shocking was Harrison's claim that Sarah had not been working alone in her investigation. She had been collaborating with an active-duty Navy SEAL team that was conducting their own internal investigation into Meridian's operations. This team had been gathering evidence of safety violations and environmental crimes that could potentially compromise national security if they became public. According to Harrison, the SEAL team had been planning to extract Sarah from her mountain location when her identity was discovered by Meridian's security forces. The extraction was supposed to happen on the day she disappeared, but communication with the team had been lost just hours before the planned operation. This revelation completely changed Cooper's understanding of the case. If Sarah had been working with an active SEAL team, her disappearance might not have been a simple murder but rather a failed extraction operation or an intervention by hostile forces seeking to prevent the exposure of classified military operations. Harrison provided Cooper with encrypted communication, records showing that Sarah had been in regular contact with someone using the call sign Neptune 6. The messages, when decoded, revealed detailed plans for a water-based extraction operation, scheduled for the exact date and time that Sarah had disappeared from Mirror Lake. The communications also indicated that the SEAL team had identified multiple hostile surveillance teams in the area around Sarah's cabin in the days leading up to the planned extraction. They had been monitoring corporate security personnel, federal agents, and at least one foreign intelligence operative who seemed interested in Sarah's research. As Cooper delved deeper into this military connection, he discovered that Meridian Industries had recently lost several major defense contracts due to safety concerns and cost overruns. The company was facing potential bankruptcy and federal investigation, giving them enormous motivation to suppress any additional scandals related to their environmental practices. The federal agents working out of Sheriff Martinez's office seemed increasingly agitated as Cooper's parallel investigation continued. Agent Wong made several attempts to convince Cooper to cease his independent inquiries, claiming they were interfering with classified operations. When Cooper refused to back down, Agent Stevens threatened to have him removed from the case entirely. Cooper's investigation hit a breakthrough when he located the journalist Sarah had planned to meet. Rebecca Chen, an investigative reporter for a major newspaper, had been expecting to receive Sarah's evidence about Meridian Industries, but had never heard from her after their initial contact. Chen revealed that Sarah had promised to provide documentation of illegal dumping, evidence of military contract fraud, and proof that corporate executives had knowingly endangered public health. Chen also disclosed that her own investigation into Meridian Industries had uncovered connections to several other environmental crimes across the country. The company appeared to be using its military contracts as cover for illegal disposal of toxic materials at sites near water supplies, serving hundreds of thousands of people. Most intriguingly, Chen had discovered that Meridian's executives had recently purchased large amounts of property near Mirror Lake, ostensibly for a new research facility. The timing of these purchases, just months before Sarah's disappearance, suggested that the company had been planning to expand their operations to the exact area where Sarah was conducting her legitimate research. As Cooper compiled this information, he began to understand that Sarah's disappearance was connected to a much larger web of corporate crime, military cover-ups, and environmental destruction. The question remained whether she had been killed to silence her, captured to extract information from her, or successfully evacuated by the SEAL team only to be hidden away for her own protection. The presence of federal agents who seemed more interested in controlling information than finding Sarah suggested that powerful forces were working to ensure that the truth about Meridian Industries never came to light. Regardless of what had happened to the brave marine biologist who had tried to expose their crimes, Detective Cooper's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, a night shift nurse at the regional medical center, contacted the sheriff's office with information she had been too frightened to report earlier. On the night Sarah disappeared, Maria had been driving home from work along the mountain road that circled Mirror Lake when she witnessed what she initially thought was a training exercise. Around midnight, Maria had seen multiple vehicles with their headlights turned off parked near the lake's boat launch. Through her car's side window, she observed several figures in dark clothing moving efficiently around the shoreline. What caught her attention most was the disciplined, military-style coordination of their movements, and the fact that they seemed to be operating some kind of watercraft without running. Lights Maria described seeing at least 6 individuals who appeared to be wearing diving gear or underwater equipment. They were loading equipment into what looked like an inflatable boat, while maintaining complete silence and using only red-filtered flashlights. The entire operation had an urgency that suggested they were either conducting a rescue or an evacuation under emergency conditions. Most importantly, Maria reported seeing a figure being helped into the boat who appeared to be wearing a wetsuit and seemed to be either injured or unconscious. The person was roughly the same size and build as Sarah Mitchell, and Maria now believed she had witnessed the attempted rescue that Commander Harrison had described. Detective Cooper immediately took Maria to the exact location where she had observed this activity. Using metal detectors borrowed from the county's archaeological department, they discovered several items buried in the sandy soil near the boat launch. Among the findings were military-grade communication equipment, specialized diving gear with Navy markings, and most significantly, a piece of fabric that matched the distinctive pattern of Sarah's research wetsuit. The fabric sample showed evidence of being cut with a sharp blade, and laboratory analysis revealed traces of human blood that matched Sarah's blood type. However, the amount of blood was minimal, suggesting that any injury had been minor rather than life-threatening. Cooper also found tire tracks in a secluded area near the lake that matched the heavy-duty vehicles Maria had described. The tire pattern indicated military-spec tires designed for stealth operations, and the depth of the impressions suggested the vehicles had been carrying substantial weight, possibly including personnel and specialized equipment. Further investigation of the area revealed camouflaged observation posts that had been established in the forest overlooking Sarah's cabin. These positions showed signs of recent use and contained military rations, high-powered surveillance equipment, and communication gear. The sophistication of the setup indicated that trained operatives had been monitoring Sarah's activities for several days before the extraction attempt. Commander Harrison, when confronted with this evidence, finally provided more details about the planned operation. He revealed that Neptune 6 was actually Lieutenant Commander David Martinez, a Navy SEAL team leader who had been investigating Meridian Industries for over a year. The team had been authorized by their commanding officers to gather intelligence on corporate activities that potentially threatened military personnel and installations. According to Harrison, Sarah had become a crucial asset in their investigation because her scientific expertise and legitimate research access provided cover for gathering evidence that military personnel couldn't obtain through official channels. The plan had been to extract her before Meridian security forces could eliminate her as a threat to their operations. Harrison disclosed that the extraction had gone wrong when the SEAL team encountered unexpected resistance. Meridian had apparently hired professional military contractors to protect their interests, and these mercenaries had been prepared for the rescue attempt. A firefight had erupted during the extraction, forcing the SEAL team to implement emergency protocols. The revelation that armed mercenaries had been operating in the area explained several mysterious incidents that local residents had reported but never understood. Strange noises in the forest, unexplained helicopter activity, and the discovery of military equipment in remote areas all suddenly made sense as evidence of an ongoing covert conflict. Detective Cooper learned that Sarah had been successfully extracted from the immediate danger but had been injured during the operation. The SEAL team had been forced to take her to a secure medical facility rather than delivering her to the planned rendezvous point with federal authorities. Her current location was classified, but Harrison assured Cooper that she was alive and recovering under military protection. This information put Cooper in an extremely difficult position. The federal agents working out of the sheriff's office were clearly not aware of the successful extraction, or they were deliberately concealing their knowledge of it. Their continued investigation suggested they were either working at cross purposes with the military operation or they represented different government agencies with conflicting agendas. The situation became more complex when Cooper discovered that Agent Wong and Agent Stevens were not actually FBI agents. Background checks revealed that their credentials were sophisticated forgeries, and the agency badges they carried belonged to federal employees who had no knowledge of any investigation. In the Mirror Lake area, Cooper realized that these fake federal agents were likely corporate security operatives sent by Meridian Industries to control the investigation and ensure that evidence of the extraction operation remained hidden. Their presence had successfully misdirected local law enforcement while allowing the real perpetrators to escape accountability. The detectives' investigation revealed that Meridian Industries had been using a network of former military personnel and intelligence operatives to protect their illegal operations. These contractors operated with sophisticated equipment and training that rivaled official government capabilities, making them extremely dangerous opponents for anyone who threatened corporate interests. Cooper also discovered that the missing waterproof case from Sarah's cabin had contained far more than environmental research. According to Commander Harrison, Sarah had been documenting a complex web of relationships between Meridian Industries, corrupt military officials, and foreign governments seeking to acquire advanced underwater military technology. The implications were staggering. Sarah's research had apparently uncovered evidence that Meridian was selling classified military equipment to foreign buyers, while using environmental research projects as cover for their illegal activities. Her disappearance was part of a much larger operation to protect a network of international arms dealers and corporate executives. But the most shocking revelation came when Harrison showed Cooper photographs taken during the extraction operation. The images clearly showed Sarah being helped into the SEAL team's boat, conscious and alert despite her injuries. However, they also showed something else that changed everything Cooper thought he knew about the case. Bound to Sarah's ankle with military-grade rope was a stone weight, apparently placed there by Meridian's mercenaries as part of a planned execution by drowning. The SEAL team had arrived just in time to prevent Sarah from being thrown into the lake's deepest waters, where her body would never have been found. The stone was still attached when the SEALs pulled her from the water, providing undeniable evidence that Meridian Industries had attempted to murder Sarah in exactly the manner suggested by the threatening messages she had been receiving. The fake drowning would have been the perfect cover for eliminating a whistleblower while making her death appear to be a diving accident. Cooper now understood that the sunken research boat had been part of an elaborate staging designed to support the cover story of an accidental drowning. Meridian's operatives had planned to dispose of Sarah's body in the lake's depths while leaving evidence that would suggest she had died during a routine research dive gone wrong. The successful intervention by the Navy SEAL team had saved Sarah's life and preserved crucial evidence of corporate murder conspiracy, but it had also created a complex situation where multiple government agencies, military units, and corporate security forces were all operating with different objectives and levels of information about what had actually occurred. Armed with the truth about Sarah's rescue, Detective Cooper faced the dangerous task of exposing a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of corporate and military power. Commander Harrison agreed to help Cooper contact Lieutenant Commander Martinez and arrange a secure meeting where the full scope of the operation could be revealed. The meeting took place at a remote military facility 3 states away, where Cooper was subjected to extensive security screening before being allowed to speak with the SEAL team leader. Lieutenant Commander Martinez was a battle-hardened operative with over 15 years of experience in underwater special operations, and his demeanor made it clear that Sarah's case was personal for him and his team. Martinez revealed that their investigation into Meridian Industries had begun when several Navy SEALs became seriously ill after using breathing equipment manufactured by the company during training exercises. Medical analysis revealed that the equipment contained toxic materials that had been causing gradual poisoning among special operations personnel. When military medical officers attempted to investigate the source of the contamination, they encountered the same bureaucratic stonewalling that Sarah had experienced with her environmental reports. This resistance had prompted Martinez's commanding officers to authorize a covert investigation into Meridian's manufacturing processes and quality control procedures. The SEAL team's investigation had led them to discover the same Pacific Northwest quarry where Sarah had conducted her research. However, their access to classified military contracts had revealed that Meridian was not just dumping toxic waste, but was actively using military testing sites as disposal locations for materials that were too dangerous for civilian waste facilities. Martinez explained that Meridian had been systematically poisoning military personnel while simultaneously selling defective equipment to foreign buyers, creating a double betrayal of national security interests. The company's executives were profiting from both the military contracts and the illegal disposal of toxic materials, using their defense contractor status to avoid environmental oversight. Sarah's role in the investigation had become crucial when her scientific expertise allowed the SEAL team to understand the full extent of the environmental damage and health risks created by Meridian's operations. Her research had provided the technical evidence needed to prove that the company's actions constituted both environmental crimes and deliberate harm to military personnel. The extraction operation had been planned after intelligence sources revealed that Meridian's security forces were preparing to eliminate Sarah before she could provide her evidence to federal investigators. The company had apparently learned about her planned meeting with the investigative journalist and had decided that murder was preferable to public exposure of their crimes. Martinez showed Cooper detailed surveillance footage that his team had captured during their monitoring of Sarah's cabin. The video clearly showed corporate security operatives placing listening devices throughout her home and installing tracking equipment on her vehicle. More disturbing was footage of these same operatives discussing plans to stage Sarah's death as a diving accident. The SEAL team had been forced to accelerate their extraction timeline when they observed Meridian's mercenaries preparing for what appeared to be an immediate assault on Sarah's location. The operatives had been armed with military-grade weapons and equipment that suggested they were prepared to eliminate anyone who interfered with their mission. During the actual extraction, Martinez's team had arrived at Mirror Lake just as Meridian's operatives were preparing to throw Sarah into the deepest part of the water with the stone weight attached to her ankle. The corporate mercenaries had already beaten her unconscious and were in the process of loading her into a boat when the SEALs intervened. The resulting firefight had been brief but intense, with the SEAL team using superior training and night vision equipment to quickly overwhelm their opponents. However, several of Meridian's operatives had escaped during the confusion, and the company's security forces had immediately implemented damage control measures to cover up the failed assassination attempt. Martinez revealed that Sarah was currently recovering at a classified military medical facility, where she was being treated for her injuries and debriefed about her research findings. Her condition was stable, but the psychological trauma of nearly being murdered had required extensive counseling and support. More importantly, Sarah's evidence had been combined with the SEAL team's intelligence to build a comprehensive case against Meridian Industries. The combined documentation revealed a pattern of criminal activity that included environmental crimes, military contract fraud, international arms dealing, and attempted murder of federal witnesses. However, prosecuting the case was complicated by the fact that many of Meridian's operations involved classified military projects, making it difficult to present evidence in civilian courts without compromising national security. The company's executives were using their defense contractor status to claim that their activities were protected under national security provisions. Cooper learned that the fake federal agents who had taken over his investigation were part of a sophisticated effort by Meridian to control information and prevent the truth about the extraction from becoming public. The company had been systematically infiltrating law enforcement agencies and news organizations to ensure that their version of events would be accepted without question. The complexity of the cover-up became apparent when Martinez showed Cooper intercepted communications between Meridian executives and corrupt officials in multiple government agencies. The company had been paying bribes and providing illegal campaign contributions to ensure protection from prosecution, creating a network of compromised officials who would suppress any investigation that threatened corporate interests. Sarah's case had become a crucial test of whether the military justice system could successfully prosecute corporate crimes that endangered both environmental safety and national security. The evidence she had gathered, combined with the SEAL team's intelligence, provided the first comprehensive documentation of how defense contractors could exploit their government relationships to commit crimes with virtual impunity. Lieutenant Commander Martinez also revealed that Sarah's research had uncovered connections between Meridian Industries and foreign intelligence services. The company had apparently been selling classified underwater technology to hostile nations while simultaneously weakening American military capabilities through defective equipment and poisoned personnel. The international implications of the case explained why so many different agencies and organizations were involved in either exposing or covering up the conspiracy. Foreign governments were interested in protecting their access to American military technology, while domestic agencies were concerned about the national security implications of prosecuting a major defense contractor. Cooper realized that his role in the investigation had evolved from solving a missing person case to helping expose one of the most significant corporate crime conspiracies in American history. The evidence he had gathered about Sarah's disappearance was now part of a larger effort to hold powerful corporations accountable for crimes that threatened both environmental safety and national security. But the most important revelation came when Martinez informed Cooper that Sarah had specifically requested that he be allowed to continue his investigation. She wanted the local law enforcement community to understand what had really happened and to ensure that other potential whistleblowers would receive protection rather than abandonment when they tried to expose corporate crimes. Sarah's message to Cooper was clear. The truth about her near murder needed to be revealed not just to bring Meridian Industries to justice, but to demonstrate that corporate power could not override the rule of law when determined investigators refused to be intimidated or corrupted. Detective Cooper returned to Mirror Lake with a dangerous mission, expose the fake federal agents while gathering additional evidence against Meridian Industries without alerting the company's extensive surveillance network. Lieutenant Commander Martinez had provided Cooper with secure communication equipment and tactical support, but the detective would need to rely primarily on his own investigative skills and local knowledge. Cooper's first priority was confronting the imposter agents who had taken control of his investigation. He arranged for Sheriff Martinez to request additional documentation from the agents, ostensibly to update local records about federal involvement in the case. When the fake agents provided forged paperwork, Cooper was ready with verification calls to real FBI headquarters that exposed their deception. The confrontation took place in the sheriff's office conference room, where Cooper had strategically positioned recording equipment provided by the SEAL team. When Agent Wong and Agent Stevens realized their cover had been blown, they attempted to maintain their authority through intimidation and threats of federal prosecution for interfering with classified operations. Cooper's response was to present them with photographs from the SEAL team's surveillance showing their collaboration with known Meridian Industries security personnel. The images clearly documented meetings between the fake agents and corporate operatives, proving that they were working to cover up evidence rather than conducting a legitimate federal investigation. Faced with undeniable proof of their deception, the imposter agents abandoned their cover story and attempted to leave the area immediately. However, Cooper had coordinated with state police to establish roadblocks around the mountain community, and both individuals were arrested before they could escape or destroy evidence. The arrest of the fake agents provided Cooper with access to sophisticated surveillance equipment and communication devices that revealed the full extent of Meridian's intelligence-gathering operations. The company had been monitoring not just Sarah's activities, but also the communications and movements of law enforcement personnel, military investigators, and potential witnesses throughout the region. Analysis of the intercepted communications revealed that Meridian Industries had been planning additional eliminations beyond Sarah's attempted murder. The company's security forces had identified several other environmental scientists, military personnel, and government officials who posed threats to their operations, and detailed assassination plans had been developed for each target. Cooper shared this intelligence with Lieutenant Commander Martinez, who immediately alerted potential victims and expanded the military investigation to include protection operations for threatened individuals. The scope of Meridian's criminal conspiracy was far larger than anyone had initially realized, involving dozens of potential victims across multiple states. The breakthrough in building a prosecutable case came when Cooper discovered that Meridian Industries had made a critical mistake in their cover-up operations. The company's executives had used their legitimate business communication systems to coordinate the illegal activities, apparently believing that their defense contractor status would protect them from surveillance by law enforcement agencies. Working with military intelligence analysts, Cooper helped decode months of corporate communications that documented everything from bribery payments to foreign agents to specific orders for Sarah's assassination. The executives had been remarkably careless in their electronic communications, providing investigators with a complete record of their criminal activities. The evidence revealed that Meridian's illegal operations extended far beyond environmental crimes and military contract fraud. The company had been operating as a front for international arms dealers, selling American military technology to hostile foreign governments while simultaneously weakening U.S. military capabilities. Through defective equipment and poisoned personnel, Cooper's investigation also uncovered the financial networks that Meridian had used to launder money from their illegal activities. The company had established shell corporations in multiple countries, used cryptocurrency transactions to hide payments, and maintained secret bank accounts that held millions of dollars in illegal profits. Most damaging to the company's executives was the discovery of recorded conversations where they explicitly discussed the decision to murder Sarah, rather than allow her to expose their crimes. The recordings captured by the company's own security systems provided undeniable evidence of premeditated conspiracy to commit murder for the purpose of concealing corporate crimes. The military justice system moved quickly once the full scope of the evidence became clear. Coordinated raids were conducted simultaneously at Meridian facilities across the country, with military personnel and federal law enforcement officers arresting dozens of company executives, security operatives, and government officials who had been compromised by corporate bribes. The raids recovered massive amounts of physical evidence, including classified military equipment that had been illegally sold to foreign buyers, documentation of toxic waste disposal operations, and financial records that revealed the full extent of Meridian's criminal enterprise. The company's sophisticated operations were systematically dismantled by investigators who had been prepared for the complexity of the case. Cooper played a crucial role in the coordinated operations by providing local knowledge and law enforcement expertise that helped military investigators understand how Meridian had been operating in civilian communities. His detailed documentation of the fake federal agents' activities helped expose the company's infiltration of law enforcement agencies. The arrest operations also revealed the extent to which Meridian had corrupted government officials at multiple levels. Several high-ranking military officers, EPA administrators, and federal prosecutors were arrested for accepting bribes and providing protection for the company's illegal activities. The corruption network had reached into agencies that were supposed to provide oversight of defense contractors. Public exposure of the conspiracy created a massive scandal that dominated national news for weeks. The revelation that a major defense contractor had been systematically poisoning American military personnel while selling classified technology to foreign enemies generated outrage among both military communities and civilian populations. Environmental groups seized on Sarah's case as an example of how corporate power could override environmental protection laws when companies had sufficient political connections and financial resources. Her near murder became a rallying point for activists, demanding stronger protections for environmental whistleblowers and more aggressive prosecution of corporate environmental crimes. The military community was equally outraged by the revelation that defense contractors could deliberately harm American service members while profiting from government contracts. The case prompted comprehensive reviews of contractor oversight procedures and new regulations designed to prevent similar abuses in the future. Cooper received recognition from both military and civilian law enforcement agencies for his role in exposing the conspiracy, but he was most proud of the fact that his investigation had helped save Sarah's life and brought justice for crimes that might otherwise have been covered up permanently. The detective's work had demonstrated that local law enforcement could successfully challenge corporate power and government corruption when investigators were willing to pursue the truth regardless of political pressure or personal risk. His collaboration with military investigators had created a model for future cases involving corporate crimes that affected both civilian and military communities. Most importantly, Cooper's investigation had ensured that Sarah Mitchell's courage in exposing environmental crimes would be remembered and that her sacrifice would lead to meaningful changes in how corporate criminals were prosecuted and punished. 6 months after her dramatic rescue from Mirror Lake, Sarah Mitchell returned to the mountain community that had feared she was dead. Her homecoming was both a celebration of survival and a testament to the power of truth over corporate corruption. The woman who stepped out of the unmarked government vehicle looked older and more cautious than the cheerful marine biologist who had disappeared on that October morning, but her determination to continue fighting for environmental justice remained unshaken. Sarah's physical recovery had been complete within weeks of her rescue, but the psychological healing had taken much longer. The knowledge that powerful corporate interests had been willing to murder her for trying to protect public health had fundamentally changed her perspective on both her work and her personal safety. She had spent months in counseling, learning to cope with the trauma of nearly being executed and the ongoing stress of testifying in multiple criminal trials. The legal proceedings against Meridian Industries and their co-conspirators had become one of the largest corporate crime prosecutions in American history. Federal prosecutors working with military justice officials had filed charges against over 200 individuals, including company executives, government officials, military contractors, and foreign agents who had participated in the conspiracy. Sarah's testimony had been crucial to the prosecution's case, providing scientific evidence of environmental crimes while also serving as a powerful symbol of corporate intimidation and violence. Her detailed documentation of illegal toxic waste disposal had helped prosecutors prove that Meridian's executives had knowingly endangered public health for financial gain. The company's top executives, including CEO Robert Meridian himself, received lengthy prison sentences for crimes ranging from environmental destruction to treason. The revelation that they had been selling classified military technology to foreign enemies while simultaneously poisoning American service members had generated sentences that would keep them imprisoned for the rest of their lives. The financial penalties imposed on Meridian Industries were equally severe. The company was ordered to pay over $3 billion in environmental cleanup costs, medical treatment for poisoned military personnel, and compensatory damages to affected communities. The penalties were so substantial that they forced the complete dissolution of the corporate entity, with its assets being liquidated to fund remediation efforts. Detective Cooper had become something of a celebrity in law enforcement circles, receiving commendations from agencies across the country for his role in exposing the conspiracy. However, he remained focused on his work in the mountain community, believing that local law enforcement had an important role to play in protecting citizens from corporate power. Cooper's investigation had also led to significant changes in how missing person cases were handled when they involved potential corporate crimes. New protocols required immediate coordination with federal agencies when disappearances occurred near facilities owned by major corporations, particularly defense contractors, with classified government relationships. Lieutenant Commander Martinez and his SEAL team received classified commendations for their role in rescuing Sarah and exposing the threat to military personnel. Their investigation had led to comprehensive reforms in how defense contractors were monitored and evaluated, with new oversight procedures designed to prevent similar abuse of government contracts. The environmental impact of Sarah's courage extended far beyond the prosecution of Meridian Industries. Her case had inspired legislation that provided stronger protections for environmental whistleblowers and created new criminal penalties for corporate executives who retaliated against employees reporting environmental crimes. Sarah returned to her work as a marine biologist, but with enhanced security measures and a broader platform to advocate for environmental protection. She had established the Mitchell Environmental Foundation, using the media attention from her case to raise awareness about corporate environmental crimes and provide support for other scientists facing intimidation. The foundation worked closely with military veterans who had been harmed by Meridian's defective equipment, helping them receive medical treatment and compensation for their injuries. Sarah's collaboration with the military community had created an unexpected alliance between environmental activists and national security advocates who shared concerns about corporate accountability. Mirror Lake itself had become a symbol of environmental resilience and community determination. The lake's ecosystem had been thoroughly tested and found to be healthy, with no contamination from Meridian's operations. The community had established an annual festival celebrating both environmental protection and the power of ordinary citizens to challenge corporate power. Sarah's cabin had been restored and enhanced with security features that allowed her to continue her research while remaining safe from potential threats. The boat dock where she had nearly been murdered had been rebuilt as a memorial to environmental scientists who had risked their lives to protect public health. The journalist Rebecca Chen had written a comprehensive book about Sarah's case that became a bestseller and was adapted into a documentary film. The public attention had helped maintain pressure for continued prosecution of corporate environmental crimes and had inspired a new generation of environmental activists. Commander Harrison continued to work as an environmental consultant but had expanded his practice to include security services for scientists and activists facing corporate intimidation. His experience with Sarah's case had demonstrated the need for professional protection services for individuals challenging powerful corporate interests. The broader impact of Sarah's case extended into corporate boardrooms across the country, where executives now understood that environmental crimes could result in severe criminal penalties rather than merely civil fines. The prosecution of Meridian Industries had established legal precedents that made it much easier for prosecutors to pursue corporate executives for environmental crimes. Sarah's story had also influenced military procurement procedures, with new requirements for environmental impact assessments and health safety evaluations of all equipment purchased from defense contractors. The military community's recognition that environmental protection and national security were interconnected had led to significant policy changes. As Sarah stood on her restored deck overlooking Mirror Lake on the first anniversary of her rescue, She reflected on how her near-death experience had ultimately led to positive changes that would protect both environmental and national security for years to come. The stone that had been tied to her ankle was now displayed in her living room as a reminder of how close she had come to death and how much had been accomplished. Through the courage of individuals willing to challenge corporate power, the investigation that had begun with her disappearance had ultimately demonstrated that democracy and the rule of law could prevail over corporate corruption when citizens, law enforcement officers, and military personnel worked together to expose the truth. Sarah's survival and the successful prosecution of her attackers had proven that even the most powerful corporations could be held accountable for their crimes when investigators refused to be intimidated or corrupted. Her case had become a landmark in the fight against corporate environmental crimes, ensuring that future generations of scientists and activists would have better protection when they chose to risk their lives to protect public health and environmental safety.